Okay, it's 4 o'clock. Welcome to the Halloween edition of the Planning and Environment Committee, and I want to thank my colleague Jenny for wearing a costume. And my wife and daughter both agreed I should wear devil's horns. I'm not sure what they were trying to tell me, but I promise you it won't take away from the seriousness of the meeting. Any disclosures of pecuniary interest? There being none, we'll move on to the consent items. Does anyone wish a consent item to be pulled? There being none, we'll put up all the consent items. Anything further? Call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to the scheduled items. The first item is item number 9, which is a public participation meeting regarding an application by The Ridge at Byron, Inc. regarding property at 2028 Wickerson Road. We'll have to open the public participation meeting. Need a mover and seconder. Anything further? Call the vote.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Good evening. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to note that there was an added in the added agenda and an extra amendment page for the official plan. So just take note on that.
Thank you.
Okay. So this is an application for 2028 Wickerson Road. It's a vacant land condominium, an official plan amendment, and a zoning amendment. The subject site is located at the southeast corner of Byron Baseline Road and Wickerson Road. The 4.8 hectare site is rectangular in shape and fronts along Wickerson Road, which is classified as a secondary collector. And the site is currently vacant with significant vegetation on the east half of the site. The purpose and effect of this application is to approve a vacant land plan of condo which will create 44 multiple residential units and 1 open space block on a private road. Official plan amendment and a zoning bylaw amendment are also required to permit the requested uses. Public meeting is required for the vacant land condo as per the Planning Act. With reviewing the provincial policy statement, this application is consistent with the PPS. Looking at the official plan, applying the low-density residential designation to the developable portion on the west side of the property to allow for single detached dwellings is appropriate. The surrounding neighborhood also has low-density residential designations. The density of the proposed development is 10 units per hectare, which complies with the density criteria as outlined in the official plan. And the application of the low-density residential designation would allow for development that can achieve a high degree of compatibility with the existing and proposed residential uses in the area. A planning impact analysis was used to evaluate the applications for the official plan amendment and the zoning bylaw amendment to determine the appropriateness of the proposed changes in land use and to identify the ways of reducing any adverse impacts on surrounding areas. Based on all of the criteria used to evaluate this application through the planning impact analysis, the application is appropriate and the proposed development will be compatible with the adjacent surrounding area. Just briefly looking at the Lunham plan, it does identify this site as a neighborhood place type. The proposed development is consistent with the classification of the streets and their intended character, goals, and function. It also is consistent with the policies of the neighborhood place type in the Lunham plan. Looking at the registration of the draft plan of vacant land condo, which would create the 44 vacant land units. We do look at criteria that would be used to create draft conditions, such as fire route signs, addressing, noise attenuation, fencing, et cetera, and these were all taken into consideration through this application. Through this process, there were some neighborhood concerns, and I'm going to go through those in some type of a detail. First, I'd like to look at the traffic that was raised. The proposed residential plan will have access from Lilac Ave to the south. The city's transportation division did not identify any concerns relating to these traffic impacts associated with this development. Looking at height, that was another concern that was brought up by the neighbors. The current permitted height is 10.5 meters through the zoning. It is not proposing to change at all. All units are proposed, however, to be 1 story with basements, as indicated by the applicant. Trees was brought up. There was some concern about the large trees on the site. Through the site plan approval process, a tree preservation report will be required. The neighbors did feel that this development would cause a little bit of loss of privacy. Again, through the site plan approval process, appropriate fencing will be considered along the property boundaries to provide privacy and to reduce noise. Property values, there is no evidence that supports the suggestion that cluster housing developments will decrease surrounding property values in the area. Looking at housing type, the neighbors also addressed a concern about the type of housing. The proposed development, again, would constitute a single detached cluster development, and this development fits within the type of uses within the area. A neighbor raised concern about drainage and groundwater in the area, which is a key component of managing the stormwater drainage for this site. And through the site plan approval process again, a proper location and configuration will be determined. A neighbor wrote in about the wildlife on the open space area to the east, and also other neighbors called concern about the large open space area to the east on this site. As noted throughout the report, the open space area will not be redesignated or rezoned, and will be dedicated as part of open space to the City of London. Snow removal was another concern. Developer has indicated that there will be private snow removal for this development. This is kind of similar to other cluster developments through the City of London. Parking was raised, and the applicant has proposed 17 or more. I think there was a number brought up about 22 visitor parking spaces on the site. Also, driveway locations and parking requirements will be confirmed through the site plan approval process. And a question was also raised about, will Alviads Drive be extended? At this time, there are no plans to extend Alviads Drive. I do want to note that on August 25th, the developer held a community meeting. And as a result of this meeting, a number of the concerns have been alleviated and will be considered through the site plan approval process. So based on the analysis of this application, the proposed vacant land condo represents an efficient use of land and encourages compact urban form. It conforms to the PPS and the city's official plan for this form of development. And the applicant's proposal to allow for cluster single detached on this site is appropriate and allows for a development which is compatible and represents good planning. Thank you.
Thank you. Any technical questions? Councillor Turner?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you really quickly. With respect to, you talked about noise fencing along, I'd imagine probably along the Byron baseline aspect. I guess the height or the aspects and what it would look like from baseline, from Byron baseline, is it, I think we have a general policy to try to avoid just creating noise wall corridors on the entranceways to the city. So, how does that work with the plan here?
Through you, Mr. Chair, a noise study will be required through the site plan approval process, and that will also be determined through that process.
Any further technical questions? The applicant wish to make submissions? Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead. First, I'm
Yes.
going to hear, I think staff wanted to input just there.
Okay, sure.
Did you want to say something?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to provide a little bit more clarification on that noise wall issue. There is a window street that's being proposed within this development that's going to alleviate the need for a long wall along that expanse. If there's anything that might be needed, it might be some corner lots that might need some smaller extended walls, but we are trying to keep the city policy and not requiring a long noise wall.
Okay. Sorry, sir. You're the applicant?
Yes.
Great.
My name is Dennis Dalton. I'm the owner of the Ridge at Byron and the developer of the site. I agree with the recommendation that Len has put forth. But by not knowing if there's others that want to make statements, I just want to reserve the right to make any comments that might be necessary. Just in respect to the noise wall issue, there is no noise wall. That's been made adequately clear. We actually changed the site plan at the suggestion of your planning staff to create the window street. So that's one item. But if other issues come up, I'd like to be able to make a
Yeah,
statement.
if there's something you can clarify that comes up
Sure.
that we haven't dealt with, sure.
Absolutely.
Thank
Great.
you, sir.
Thank you.
All right, we're going to go to public input now, starting on my right in that first area, moving over to the middle. Any public participation? Moving over. Hi, Sophia, how are you? Going over to the other side. There's no public input at the bottom. Okay, public input going once, twice. We'll close the public participation meeting. And voting. Councillor Hill?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And questions and comments from staff, or from the committee, I'm sorry. Somebody wish to move the recommendation? Get the motion up. Any comments, questions? Call the motion.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Obviously, no need to clarify.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Have a good evening. Moving on to item number 9, which is a public participation meeting regarding an application by Sifton Properties Limited regarding a property located on a portion of 3260 Singleton Avenue. We'll have to open the public participation meeting. Voting?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is an application for a vacant land condominium at on a portion of 3260 Singleton. The site is on the south side of Southdale Road, just east of Spring Meadow Road. As you can see from the projection on the screen, it's just the south side of the subject lands being proposed for development at this time. The development consists of 94 townhouse dwelling units, all on a private road. There is access from Singleton Avenue and Spring Meadow Road. 11 of the units have frontage along Spring Meadow Road with driveway access as well. The proposed development is at a density of approximately 55 units per hectare. The applicants at this time have come in for the first phase of development. The second phase is expected at a later date. As you can see, there's a number of roads that will eventually be looped around to form full crescent, so to speak, within the development. However, at this time, the applicants are just choosing to do this as one phase of a development. Proposed elevations for the development, these are your typical 4-unit cluster elevations with ingress and egress to the units from both the front and the rear. The majority of the units are clusters of 4 units. There are exceptions to that with a cluster of 10 and a cluster of 12. The development itself is consistent with the objectives of the multifamily medium-density residential designation. It does have regard for the London Plan as well as is consistent with the BPS. The development is permitted within the R6-5 and the R5-6 zones. There were a number of variances that were applied for and granted by the Committee of Adjustment last week to allow some exceptions because of the new zone line being created as a result of the phased approach for development. There's a concurrent site plan application which we expect to be executed within the next couple of weeks, maybe even this week. And subsequent to that, and upon the signing of the development agreement for the site plan, future removal of holding will be before this committee. Our report to the committee is that the approval authority take any issues, if any, were raised at this meeting from this committee, and that staff report to the approval authority for approval. Thank you.
Technical questions from committee? There being none, we will move to the, first of all, the applicant. Does the applicant have anything? Thank you.
Do I have to turn anything on? You can hear me.
Yeah.
Maureen Zanti from Sifton Properties, and we are in agreement with the staff report.
Thank you. We'll now go to public participation. So we'll go up to my right, moving across through the center. Won't embarrass you again, Sophia. I just did it. Moving over to the other side. Any other public participation? Going once, going twice. We'll close the public participation meeting. Voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Committee? Any questions, comments? Motion is up. Anything further? Voting?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to item number 11, which is a public participation meeting regarding an application by Ironstone Building Company regarding properties located at 2044, 2062, 2070, and 2100 Meadowgate Boulevard. We'll have to open the public participation meeting. Voting? Councillor Park?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good afternoon, committee. So the application of the address you just read out is for an official plan and zoning bylaw amendment. For some context, it's located within the southeast corner of the city and also southeast of the intersection of Highbury and Commissioners. Shown here with frontage off of Meadowgate Boulevard. In the general area, there's vacant and established commercial development to the west. There's an established residential neighborhood to the east, comprised mostly of single detached dwellings, as well as some medium-density forms and townhousing. To the north, across Commissioners, there's the citywide sports park, and then further north, there's the Meadow Lily Woods, ESA. From an aerial view, the subject site is comprised of 4 separate parcels. So starting in the north, 2044, 2062, 2070, and 2100 Meadowgate Boulevard. The proposal is for cluster townhouse developments with a total of 111 units, with a mix of two-story and 3-story units. The three-story units highlighted here frame Meadowgate Boulevard and also the private drive. That's the road sort of running in the middle east-west direction. There's also three-story back-to-back units, which are shown here in the north as pink. And then a mix of two-story split level and then two-story traditional, transitioning towards the south where there are existing two-story townhouses along Evans Boulevard. For the three-story townhouses, the conceptual rendering shows the front and the rear. And I'll just go through these briefly. The three-story back-to-back units have a front and a rear similar since they're back-to-back. The two-story townhouses have front and rear, which are mostly the same, given that the interior split level or traditional would be the main factor. And these conceptual renderings have been provided at this stage, but will be developed further along through site plan approval. The right-of-way that's shown in yellow here, that's the access into the site. It also is established to serve the commercial lands to the west. So this includes the former Rona Plaza and the vacant lands owned by Loblaws. It was proposed here as part of Block 266 when this was in draft plan approval. And when the subdivision was registered in 2005, it transitioned to its separate block. So it's shown here. Through the consultation with the community and the notification process, we heard some concern about the loss of the commercial lands, as well as some other issues that I'll be going through in a little bit more depth. The existing community commercial node extends directly from Highbury to Meadowgate Boulevard and encompasses both developed and vacant lands. The subject site, shown here in red, will be removed from the node, so that would be transitioning to the medium-density residential designation. And then with respect to what's been developed and what's existing, there's a existing strip plaza along the Commissioners and Meadowgate corner, place of worship directly north. And then there's also a large portion of the site, or of the node, that's vacant. And then furthermore, the lands that are zoned in the community shopping area will actually preserve the gross floor area available as that zone distributes the available gross floor area for commercial uses by proportion. So taking that parcel out would mean a greater proportion left for the existing CSA zone lands. The second issue was how will this additional population be accommodated in terms of schools? There's an existing French Catholic school, and there's also some vacant land owned by the Thames Valley District School Board. So once they have funding and critical mass for student population, they should be able to build on the land. And then transportation has also been an issue. The intersection of Commissioners and Meadowgate is specifically identified. I wanted to show here that the majority of the subdivision has been developed, but then all of the lots and blocks shown here in green are still draft approved. And that also includes accesses to Bradley Avenue from Meadowgate Boulevard. So eventually, upon full build out, there will be more options for motorists to access Highbury, Commissioners, and then Bradley Avenue as well. Going through our policy framework, it's consistent with the provincial policy statement as it provides an appropriate range and mix of uses in the area, develops an underutilized site within an existing settlement area, and this site has full services and facilities available to it, so it's not an extension. In terms of our official plan, it's an appropriate location for medium-density residential development. It meets all the criteria in terms of locating near commercial uses, being within an area of existing medium-density residential uses, and being on a secondary collector road. It's a compatible scale and form with surrounding area, and it slightly diversifies local housing options, noting that there are some existing medium-density townhousing developments. The Jackson Summerside area study was a review that was done in 2000 of the 1990 plan. Originally, in the 1990 plan, these lands were designated highway service commercial and medium-density residential. In 2000, they changed to community shopping area. So this is revisiting a little bit about the residential potential that initially existed. The Jackson update in 2000 also included official plan updates and changes to the draft plans of subdivision that have now been deposited. The recommendation is for multifamily medium-density residential designation. And the recommended zoning is for an R55 and a private road R55. The R55 allows for the cluster townhouse and cluster stacked townhouse dwellings, and the PR is a private road, so this recognizes the use of the right-of-way and also highlights the various users of it, i.e. the commercial lands. Site plan is directed to consider including a warning clause detailing the use of the private road. To design the private road as a street, this is complete with sidewalks and tree planting. To orient the dwellings to Meadowgate Boulevard and the private road, which is captured in the existing conceptual site plan. And to design end corner units with front facade detail and high level of design. So this shows the location of the private road, which is combined with the cluster zoning for the R55. Thank you.
Thank you. Any technical questions from the committee? Councilor Van Holst.
Thank you very much, and through the staff, just wanted a confirmation that there's a median in front of blocks A and B, and if people wanted to leave the subdivision, they'd have to go into the subdivision and around the roundabout and outwards to do that. Will that median remain?
Someone answer that.
Thank you, through you, Mr. Chair. There is an existing median. We haven't received any comments from transportation indicating that that would change. Those blue units would be accessing Meadowgate Boulevard directly, so they would be going through the roundabout.
I need to turn my microphone on, and now I'm going to turn it off and let you speak.
Good evening, committee members, city staff, and members of the public. My name is Lindsay Clark, and I am the agent and planner representing the Ironstone Building Company, who are the applicants. First, I'd like to thank the planning staff for working well with us through the planning consultation stages and bringing this report forward to planning committee tonight. So we really appreciate that. I'm not going to go through a lot of great detail since Sonia Wise already went over the site, the project history, as well as the current application that's before you this evening. However, briefly, just to overview a little bit here, the townhouse development we are proposing is compatible with the existing low and medium residential land uses surrounding the site and provides appropriate interface with the adjacent commercial lands, whereby efficiently utilizing the existing services. As such, we concur with the recommendations brought forward by Sonia Wise in the planning report. And I would like to, I look forward to answering any further comments or questions that the committee, staff, or the public may have in relation to this application. Thank you.
So now we'll go to the public, and I'm going to start up here on my right in this area. Would you like to speak? Okay, you just have to go to the microphone, give us your name and address. Thank you.
My name is Gita Cook. I live at 1503 Evans Boulevard. So my concern is we built the house 9 years ago with the assumption that there would be a grocery store in that land. And I feel that adding more houses to the subdivision, which already has so much residential property, but we have not enough retail property in the area. I know Rona closed down, but we need more retail as opposed to letting more residential in, so that's my concern. It was to be a master plan community when we moved in, and it hasn't really worked out the way it was supposed to. Was it said that you would take part of the land, but it would open up more retail space?
If you have a question, you can relay it, and then I'll get the applicant to, but we can't ask questions sort of directly. What was your question, sorry?
That the land that was going to be for for residential now, would that expand the other existing retail commercial land? I thought that's what was kind of said.
Okay. Did you have anything else you wanted to say before the question, I get an answer for you?
That's it.
Okay.
Thank you.
Maybe staff could answer that right now. I think you did mention that in your presentation.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Chair. There are currently 3 properties that have the community shopping area zone, which distributes the total 30,000 square meters of gross floor area on those 3 properties. So removing that one portion of the CSA actually allocates the rest of the gross floor area to the remaining 2 properties within the zone, the CSA zone. Thank you.
So I take it your answer is that it would provide a further opportunity for retail?
Thank you to you. Yes, it would. So even the Rona Plaza that is almost currently at its max, it could provide further redevelopment opportunities if they were to add to the plaza. And then also the Loblaws, which is the vacant site. When it does come in for development, it would have a higher gross floor area to accommodate additional businesses.
Okay. Do you understand? If you don't understand, I'd like you to be able to, so. Okay, thank you.
Some retail space, Aaron, especially walkable, accessible retail space will be important. But I think Ms. Wise's comments are fair, that it actually serves to consolidate the amount of retail space into the parcels and perhaps better utilize land rather than having rather significant large spaces allocated for commercial that have large interspaces in between them. So I think it makes better use of space, and I think this is an appropriate development.
Thank you, Councillor. Anyone else from the committee? Councillor Park?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I think that the comments raised about increasing population in the area to get a school in the area is well taken, and I think that will serve a lot of the younger families in the area. And to add to what Councillor Turner's point was about the more walkable spaces, it would be nice to see a more neighborhood feel, and I really support the recommendation from staff on that. And I also like the fact that we're increasing the diversity of housing options in the area. As he said, it's quite homogeneous as it is, and it's good to see some change coming about.
Councillor Helmer?
First, I have a question for our staff, and it's about the recommendation about designing the private road as a public street. And I certainly like that idea, but I could imagine some confusion coming up later on in the future when people think it's a public street and who maintains it and what exactly are the expectations, because it looks just like any other street, and I think people forget that it's a private road. So talk to me about how you've thought about how that will happen out in the future once this is built out, and maybe people have forgotten these things that happened at the beginning.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the access and the easement was something that's already existing. So there's already an existing easement agreement to determine maintenance of that area in terms of who's contributing to it, whether it be the dominant or servient lands. So we're actually accommodating that into our process. But those rights and that legal access is already established and is something that we're dealing with.
Through you, Mr. Chair. Supplemental to that, I think what the street environment we're talking about is making sure there's sidewalks. I think the sidewalks on either 1 or 2 sides and street trees are really the semblance of a public street environment. Otherwise, it would look, and that's not dissimilar to other condo type developments that exist that we've done in other parts of the city.
Anything further, Councillor Helmer? Comments?
I'm good on questions, but I got some comments.
Okay.
So a couple of things. So I'm going to support the recommendation. One of the things I really like about this redesignation, change in the zoning is that we already have an existing transit route that runs right in front of where this is going to be developed, and that's pretty rare that you've got a pocket like this where you've already got good transit service from the 16 Adelaide, and I think it's a good opportunity for additional residential buildings. I also think that there's already population there for a school. This was a very highly ranked school by the school board. It just hasn't got funding from the province, and I want to be clear about that. Perhaps this will help in terms of making that a higher priority for funding, but I think the population already is there, and the school board has been clear about that. I do think also in terms of encouraging the continued development of that commercial node, that having some additional residential in this area would be supportive of that as well. So I think it's a fair point, and it's been made by the members of the community in their feedback that, you know, the actual development compared to how this was planned is not gone exactly. I think people expected a school a long time ago. They thought there'd be a grocery store a while ago. But adding some more residents in this area is only going to help support both those uses, the more commercial and also I think on the school board side. So I do support it. I think it'll be great to have a slightly more wider range of options in terms of housing. It's a great neighborhood, and I'm sure lots of people are going to want to live there once this kind of housing is available to them.
Councillor Van Holst.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and through you, I want to say that Councillor Zafim and I have been working on this one together. He had a few comments he wanted me to express. In following up with the residents, he's noticed that there were a number not in favor of it because of reducing the commercial space, but we've, of course, dealt with that. It's going to be essentially in the same way as we're increasing the density of residential, we'll be increasing the density of the commercial as well. However, the people who purchase close to there, hoping to be able to walk just 100 meters to a commercial space, are understandably disappointed with this. There, of course, also expressed the ideas that with more people, there's more likely a chance that the commercial will be coming sooner. A number of the residents, I must say, and I spoke with some of them at length, were upset about tonight's meeting, it being on Halloween. There was a number of people who wanted to come, but because of family commitments weren't able to do that. The concerns among the others that I've expressed were the density of this, and they're concerned about the traffic, especially that roundabout at Reardon, just what's going to happen there. They say it's already problematic during the rush hours. So, and the positioning of the homes, so the driveways onto Meadowgate, they thought might be a problem as well. So those were the issues that I wanted to bring up to the committee to see if there was some way to ameliorate those concerns. I guess the last thing that came up was, of course, a property value, because they were, again, supposed to be located close to a commercial when this was planned. And a number of people were concerned that might affect the values of their homes. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anything further from the committee? I just thought I would mention that in the school issue, I know I was a school board trustee before I was here, and there wasn't a very long periods of time that went by when I wasn't asked, when are we going to get a school in this area? It was a constant issue, and it was frustrating not to be able to do that, and it's frustrating that the commercial space hasn't developed. So hopefully with this change, it may actually help, and I'm really hopeful of that. But I certainly understand the concerns of the community. So anything further? Calling the vote? Or we need a mover seconder, then we can call. Anything further? Voting?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Moving on to item number 12, which is a public participation meeting regarding a request for an extension, revision of draft approval and zoning bylaw regarding 255 South Carriage Road. And we'll have to open the public participation meeting. Anything further? Voting?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Good evening, go ahead.
Evening. Yes, as it indicated, this is a revision and extension of a draft plan subdivision at 255 South Carriage Road. This is a subdivision that came in for review and application back in '08 through various reiterations of designs and dealing with consolidation of two different draft plans, so on and so forth, and an OMB hearing. Final draft approval was given back in 2013 from the board. In the interim, as you can see, the area that's in blue above is actually been registered as the first phase of the subdivision, and we're now looking at an extension, a further extension to the draft approval that was ultimately given by the Ontario Municipal Board in 2013, and a revision to allow for better streetscapes, which also assists within their engineering plans. We'll go through. As indicated, the original draft plan showed that there was two loops down the bottom where the stormwater management pond is between the residential use and the CN tracks. There's a stormwater management facility maintained or made city stormwater management pond. As you can see, the two arrows show where those loops are. Also note is the single-family home or single-family detached dwelling lots that were approved along South Carriage and along Street A, which is now Finley Crescent. This area is multifamily medium density designation, so the single-family homes were a use that were proposed and were permitted through the previous form of the design. Coming to today's date, there has been a revision. As you can see, those two loops have been removed. There is one street along the top of the stormwater management pond, which provides for much better connected subdivision. It allows for, there's a walking trail that also goes along the top of that pond that connects onto Hyde Park Road, which, as you know, is intended to be a commercial village, and it connects into the subdivisions to the east of this site, including a large city park with play equipment in it, as well as the environmentally significant woodlot that is located on just to the west of this site. The blocks are noted in the with the red. Those are the multifamily blocks. They're proposed to be zoned for street towns, which will provide for a mix of uses in this area. That wasn't previously there, it was, as you noted in the previous one, was all single detached dwellings, so it adds for uses in a mix of housing types, which also improves the overall design of the subdivision. Going on to the existing zoning, as you can see, the existing zoning was all for residential single family. As occurred back in 2012 at the previous public participation meeting, the applicant or the property owners at 1144 Coronation Drive had indicated concerns with privacy, and at that time a special provision was provided on the single family homes that did front along South Carriage for a maximum story of one dwelling or to a maximum of 5 meters. So through a bit of a process, and through some cooperation and discussions between the applicant and the homeowners, the townhouse zoning is recommended, and that consensus was brought on that the special provision be maintained that would only allow for 1 story there, which would give the same permissions that were granted during the 2012 rezoning and public participation process. And again, as noted, the block of cluster of row type homes where it's going to be brought down along Finley Drive. There'll be some holding provisions that are provided. Again, that's to make sure there's an agreement in place and that their water looping and our access are all in place prior to them going forward and building there, so they function correctly. Public participation process, I think we talked about the issue with the privacy being maintained as was approved through the 2012 issue. One thing that has come up, and I believe there's people from the public here who will speak to this, is that they still have concerns regarding stormwater management. As you know, through the stormwater management process, through the subdivision process, we have a bylaw in place that says, the applicants have to maintain stormwater on their site and deal with it through the subdivision agreement, through the engineering, which they have. And then at the end of the day, a development agreement will be entered into with the developer to ensure that stormwater management is mitigated and properly managed within the subdivision. So I mean, that's what we do as the city. The other one was again, we talk about family of property values. We all know about property values and the concept around that, and the fact that it's very difficult to determine property value based on form. It really is more on a management, not how the properties are used, not in the form themselves. The forms are appropriate in this location. They help, again, ask for a diverse mixture of homes in this area. Okay, so conclusion, it does meet the provincial policy statement. The draft plan is consistent with the Hyde Park Community Plan as indicated. Now with the window street, there's more connectivity. The design itself is better. There's provisions for exterior side yards to be designed and envisioned or to be engaged with the streetscape by providing some architectural features along that way. The proposed draft plan is also consistent with the zoning. It meets the medium density zone as well as the low density that's in the area, and is compatible with the official plan. There is a section in my report about the London plan. I forgot to add it as a slide, but I can tell you that in review with the London plan, that the proposed change in zone and the proposed changes in the design of the subdivision is more in keeping with the London plan and does bring in those good positive design functions for the subdivision, or at least some of the portions of it. The condition, the zoning will help, the zoning and the holding provision will ensure that it will be developed correctly, and that the basically all the services are available, so it meets it is a proper, it's good planning, and the zoning bylaw amendment is appropriate. Thank you.
Thank you. Technical questions from the committee? Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Yes, to the drainage issue, I assume that this would drain into the stormwater management ponds that are almost immediately adjacent. Is that correct?
You know, surprisingly, I don't think that's correct, but I believe there's some routing in there that I'm not exactly 100% sure of, but our development engineering folks can tell you how it's routed. It's routed somewhere, that's for sure.
Well, we know water will flow one way or another. I mean, there's a phenomenal amount of stormwater management in that area. I suspect engineering has a more precise answer.
Cruella?
Oh, through the chair. The existing condo site, the minor flows for that site actually go through the existing storm system and head to a different pond, which is the Pond 1, which is on the west side of Hyde Park Road. The site and its grading drains towards this pond, Pond 1B1, and the original approval for the condo has a rear yard catch basin and a low point at the bottom corner, which picks up and goes through that system to the Pond 1, but then major flows are kind of caught through that process. And then through the engineering design for the subdivision that surrounds it, we've looked at that specific catch basin to make sure that no new flows are contributing to that low spot. And we're keeping the spillover point, the over elevation is remaining the same. And then we also asked through the review that we had the consultant model the drainage going to that site to ensure that during up to a 100-year event, any ponding over that catch basin is within our design standards. So there is a low point there where some drainage will pond during larger events, but we've maintained or improved on the situation from existing conditions.
That was much more precise.
Any other technical questions? Does the applicant wish to say anything? Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rick Knutson on behalf of Kenmore Homes, London. I believe some of the neighbors want to speak to you about a couple of issues. I have one issue that I want to raise with you, and that's at the bottom of page 152. That has to do with some very vague design standards that the condition is proposing to put into the conditions of draft approval. If I had testable issues, I'd be happy to meet them. But I don't know what porch would be required by urban design, what windows. And as Mr. Katsifas will tell you, every time we change windows, change roof lines on a redesign, there are many thousands of dollars in that redesign have to be done because we alter structural elements within the house. So if I had some defined criteria, I'd be happy to accommodate those. There is a defined criteria related to the fencing. I'm happy to live with that. The other more vague issues, subject to the approval of the manager, maybe fine today, might be a different manager and not fine tomorrow. And I would ask that that be sent back for some clarification. That's all I wanted to, actually, the other point I was going to make to you, sir. I'm sure Mr. McLean is happy to see this revised design. It's very similar to what Alistair proposed to you back in '08, that we'd had some fairly significant discussions about. So I believe the neighbors want to speak to you, and I'd be happy to respond to some of those comments at that time. Thank you.
Did staff want to respond to that design issue so the committee's aware of that? The issue that he just raised with design?
Through you, Mr. Chair. Well, there is urban design guidelines related to the area, the Hyde Park Community Design Guidelines, which give some guidance as to what's needed to occur. The particular condition, which is, in my understanding, is a standard condition that is used on subdivisions, and it relates to ensuring that side lot conditions have a general upgraded facade, can include porches, can include windows, but the intention is that we don't end up with large blank walls along those side lot conditions that front onto public spaces. This is a pretty standard condition that is used across the board.
Thank you. I'll leave that with the committee then. Well, I don't want a long back and forth. The committee will ask questions about this, I suppose, if they wish. So we're any technical questions? No? We're gonna go to the public now, over in the area to my right, moving over to the center. Yes. We just need your name and address.
It's Majwit Singh, and I live at 1144 Coronation Drive, and I'm Unit 15. I also sit on the board of directors of our condo corporation 611. We are really pleased with the compromise that has come to light about the one-floor condominiums to the west of our property. However, the residents are really not reassured about the drainage issues that we have in the area. This area has been known to have high water levels, and we are still experiencing high water levels in the area, even though the services have been put in for the development behind us. One set of units to the west of us have had a pond sitting water for the last 2 years. We have had issues with our maintenance crew not being able to maintain our properties because of the high water levels in our area. So we would really like to know what recourse is there for us, not only as residents, but as a corporation, and the financial impact that it could eventually have on us in the future, because it could really be significant.
Okay, I'll try to get you an answer from staff on that. Anyone else wish to speak? Okay, moving across then, no one else. Oh, you have to go to the microphone and you have to give us your name and address.
Hi. The top arrow, I see that the...
No, first of all, I need your name and your address.
Okay.
Yeah.
My address, Milliken is my name, Jim Milliken. My address is 17, 144 Coronation Drive. I'm actually the one with the pond in the back for the past 2 years. I've spoke to the builder many times and City Hall, but so far it still says. They do a little bit and then it comes back, never goes away. But regarding to the area of the top arrow, I believe now that it is going to be one-story single-family residence. Is that what I seen? Whenever it showed up the breakdown, one page back.
Okay, you have a question that you want an answer to?
Is it one-story single-family?
The area where the arrow is at the top?
Where the top arrow is.
All right, can someone answer that?
No, that's not single detached. That's been rezoned to the R4-4, which will allow for cluster townhome developments. But they will only be 1 story in height.
All right, there you go. That's the answer to your question.
I didn't hear.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, where the red arrow is, will allow for townhomes. Those townhomes where that red arrow is will only be 1 story in height.
Okay,
Thank you.
you're welcome. Any other questions? Take your time if somebody wants to speak. All right, so we'll ask for public participation once, twice, and we'll close the public participation meeting. Councillor Helmer? And Deputy Mayor Hubert. Thank you.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
All right, I wonder if someone just could initially address the issue that was raised about the lack of reassurance about drainage, that they're still experience high water levels, and in fact, there's been sitting water for 2 years. I don't know whether that's what that's related to, or whether that's the developer. Yes, sir.
If I might, Mr. Chairman, and maybe Jen has some additional information she could provide. The townhouse development, 1144, had some challenged drainage when it was built. And as a result, it has a low spot. Our development, or Kenmore's development, does not contribute flows onto the lands of 1144, city policy, et cetera. We're all directed away from it. It's just a situation that may not have a resolution at this point in time. And
Through the chair, the site design for the condo, if working right, should be able to positively drain the flows within the site to that low point rear yard catch basin and take them away through that catch basin. If that's something that's not working properly, we can look at that site and take that back, see where our status is in terms of signing off on the original site plan for its internal grading. So that's one thing, is just make sure the site itself is grading properly and it's doing what it was designed to do. It does have a low spot though, so during above a 2-year event, so above the design storm of the pipe that goes away from that catch basin, you will have periodic ponding, but it shouldn't be standing water. It should naturally drain away over time once the storm is over. So, you know, from the site itself, that's how it should be working. If it's not, we can take that back and have a look and make sure the grades are working right on the site.
Okay.
Rick's correct that the subdivision itself should be self-contained and pull the drainage away. And if during the interim construction, if there's any complaints otherwise, we can also address that.
Okay. Anybody have any questions arising out of what I just asked? You may. Deputy Mayor Hubert.
Yeah, I'm a little puzzled, and simply because we've spent so much money in that area in terms of stormwater management, and there's, you know, large stormwater management ponds that should be able to handle the water flow. So, in terms of the holding provisions on this, there's a number of holdings, and is there one that would be until we're satisfied that we have the appropriate drainage?
if I might, Mr. Chairman, the subdivision agreement would look after all those design elements when it comes forward. That detailed design has not been done at this point, and it would be done and approved by the staff before you would be recommending the subdivision agreement.
The H holding provision requires that a development agreement be entered into prior to the subdivision agreement being approved, or as part of the subdivision agreement being approved. Through that process, the design studies and the detailed engineering drawings will be approved that will clearly demonstrate conformity with and the ability to have proper stormwater management on site. And then but prior to the registration of the stuff, prior to the registration of the subdivision. So yes, there is an H holding provision that will require those issues to be clearly resolved, identified, and dealt with through the detailed engineering drawings.
Okay, and that's the answer that the public needed to hear, is this is not the end of the road or the end of the pipe, so to speak. But this is really the beginning of the process of making sure that those issues are dealt with.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A member of the public had raised a point about there being standing water at this point. I wonder if staff could further address that, because I see there's not much reassurance up there.
Through the chair, as I mentioned before, we would want to maybe work with the residents to make sure that their site grading is working properly, because that could be one cause of standing water. Another might be if there's any interim grading within the site alteration that the developer's doing that is causing any change. And we'll work with them to make sure that they're making the drainage away from the existing development.
Yeah, please. Yeah, thank you. Our community corrected our grading issues with the builder and the corporation back when the development was, when we were having issues. I'm an original owner there, and I was sitting on the board previously when all of this took place. So I know that Randy McKay at the time, the builder, Waverly Homes, and the corporation, we were in agreement, and the grades were corrected, and they were regraded by the city at that time. Right now, from a bird's eye view, from my deck, the elevation of the development behind us is much higher than what our development is. So yes, the water is flowing down, and there is a swale at the back of our fencing that the water is going somewhere, but you know, it's also sitting. Yeah.
Yeah, through the chair, I'm happy to go out and visit the site and make sure that things are working properly and what's happening. The appearance in a half-constructed state on a subdivision like this, you sometimes see the road elevation up at this point, and then a drop where the future homes will be, because the foundations, when they're excavated, then raise up the grade. So looking at a site in a half-developed state, it's difficult to see the ultimate, but the question is, are there interim conditions that are contributing to the problem? And we're happy to go out on site and make sure that that's not the case.
I really think that's the best course of action, is to have actually people go out, look at it, and find out what the problem is and try to solve it, okay? Anything further from the committee? Councillor Helmer?
Thank you. So I have a question for our staff, and I know you did a London plan analysis, and I thought of it when I was going to ask this question because there's a number of, but anyway, I'm asking about this one. So did you look at, I know you changed the street pattern a little bit, and did you look at the connectivity ratio, and how does that match up with the targets we got in London plan for connectivity ratio around 1.5?
To be honest, I did not do a connectivity ratio analysis, to be fair, but I can, from just the outline of it, it is an improvement on what was the original draft approved plan, and it does improve connectivity for the site. As to what the actual ratio is, I would have to go and quite honestly familiarize myself with it and be able to run those analysis for you, because I did not turn my mind to that actual ratio.
I asked partly because it seemed like a big improvement to me, and I was glad to see that, and I think that's the kind of direction we need to be going in when we're doing our subdivisions. It's no problem. I barely understand it, and I think it's Mr. Galloway who's the guru of the connectivity ratio, but he looks like he might want to jump in. No? Okay. So I also wanted to just address this issue on the special provisions for the corner lots, like putting these provisions in, because certainly we've seen this in the Southwest Area Plan. We had a number of developments come in, and there are placemaking guidelines there, and we've seen this exact provision there. We've also seen it as a special provision on a couple of other, just since we've been on council. And I think it's quite workable. I realize that there's some ambiguity there, but I think that's better than being overly specific and then having a big problem later on. It says, you know, work it out with the manager of urban design, then he's going to sign off on the design, and I think that that's give some latitude in terms of figuring that out. And I think that Mr. Knutson and the developer should probably talk to Mr. Galloway about that. I think it's a reasonable provision to have in the agreement.
Anything further from the committee? All right. Mr. Kotsovas.
Just on the page 152, on the last line, we may need to amend that line and maybe strike it. And the reason being is it's really the issuance with relation to the building permits. It's not applicable law. There's been case law with respect to this, and typically what we've done is we've scrubbed all our conditions. This looks like it's an old legacy language that had prior to application of building permits. And that issue has already been addressed and dealt with in the courts, and you cannot restrict someone from applying for a building permit or obtaining a building permit, tying them to a subdivision agreement. So I think the rest stands. I think all of the other components and the conformance to the Hyde Park Community Plan, all of that still needs to stay, but the last line we will probably need to strike.
Right, you're talking the line that starts further and
Yes.
ends with plan?
Yes.
All right, and that's because of legal advice you've had? Just
That's case law, so that's.
Okay,
It's,
fair enough.
And I've tried to scroll through all the other conditions just to make sure there is nothing else tied to building permits. And this is the only one that still is in there.
All right.
From my quick cursory review.
Okay, Councillor Hellman?
Oh.
Well, that's interesting, and certainly we've passed this exact same provision with that language you're saying is problematic as recently as September. So we might want to take a look at it for other ones too, if that's the case. And I would just ask perhaps between now and council that our legal staff take a look at it.
Want to add that?
And we can have their opinion as well as Mr. Kotsovas.
Thank you. Does anybody have a problem with us adding that in, that deletion of that sentence, if there's a difficulty with it? All right. And then we'll get a, subject to further comments, of course, we'll get a mover and second. Is it in there? Did you take, or are you taking it out? That sentence.
I put it in so that, like, I'll reword it, but just so that people know what I'm taking out.
So where do we see that?
It's right at the top, right underneath the opening sentence.
Okay.
Sorry, I put it here.
Yeah, okay, I see that. Someone prepared to move and second the motion? Anything further? Voting?
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Thank you. Moving on to,
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We're also happy to work with the city in terms of the drainage issue.
okay, thank you. We'll hold you to that. Moving on to item number 10, which is the delegation from Mr. Levin, Chair of the Environmental and Ecological Planning Advisory Committee. Good evening.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, and I'll resist the urge to have your photograph as such posted on the community website.
Thank you very much. I
You're
appreciate
welcome.
that.
Here on a couple of items. The first, Mr. Chair, is item 9, which is page 155 of your agenda. It's just, we received a report from staff on the Sipton Bog. There's a recommendation to change some of the boardwalk and viewing area. And having represented that area at one time, I know at that time there was a lot of interest in Sifton Bog, and I don't know, just for the benefit of the current councillor, there may be a change from the floating deck to another one further back. On our items for discussion, also page 155, item 12, there's a subject land status report that we just received at the meeting. I understand from staff and from the secretary of the committee that at your next meeting on the 14th, that particular report will be before you. I just wanted to know if you wanted me to appear to speak to the working group comments or not. We can certainly submit them in writing, but if you want me to be here to speak to the matter.
I think that's always helpful.
Okay.
At least from my point of view, and I think the committee agrees. That would be helpful if you are able to.
Thank you. The item 13 is on page 156 of your agenda. It's a very exciting project. It's one that's been funded by Canada 150, and it's going to address a very serious invasive species invasion in the Westminster Ponds behind the firefighters' tower. So it's something that EPAC and Nature London had actually supported because of the severe infestation there of the invasive species common buckthorn. And that's a segue for me to item 14 on the agenda. In particular, item B and C is dealing with, I'm not sure how I get this up on the screen these days, but it deals with, oh, there we are. This is the worst invasive species in Ontario right now. It's called Phragmites, and you may have seen it along the roadways on Veterans Memorial Parkway, Highbury, Gainsborough Road, and the concern that the committee has, it reviewed an early draft of an invasive species management plan or strategy for the municipality, and it's been referred to a working group. It'll be a really important part for the city to deal with a variety of invasive species, including giant hogweed, a species that's actually dangerous to the public. But this invasive Phragmites also has challenges. As you can see, it grows quite tall. It can be a problem of sight lines for drivers as well as a big problem for our wetlands. One of the things the committee, your advisory committee, talked about is rather than waiting for the strategy, and perhaps it might not even be funded until your next four-year budget cycle, is to take advantage of projects that are already underway, road projects. For example, soon there'll be the extension of Bradley Avenue. And what generally happens in these road projects and standing water along the roadways, this is where the Phragmites shows up. And if it ends up in any of the watercourses, particularly in the southwest area, it's going to end up into your constructed wetland on Dingman Drive. It's just going to keep spreading. So the recommendation is for you to request your staff to look at its existing road projects where Phragmites can and is a problem, and use some of the project money to deal with it now, and make sure that's included in future road projects where Phragmites might become a problem.
Thank you very much. Committee, any questions? Councillor Helmer?
Thank you. So I think as an interim measure, that's an interesting idea. Do you think, and I realize we're at planning committee and not Civic Works committee, but do you think that our existing staff resources in the planning of those projects would be able to identify, we have a Phragmites issue here and we need to include it in the reconstruction plan for once we're done this project? Or do you think it's going to require pulling of resources from elsewhere? And if so, from where?
Well, I'm not in a position to be able to answer the question with full knowledge, but I see staff from both transportation and from Environment and Parks Planning here who might be able to.
All right, well, is that all right, Councillor Helmer, if they have a shot at it? Any thoughts on that?
Sure, through the chair. Certainly the city's ecologists are capable of identifying the species. Incorporating that into capital projects and how they would be addressed and managed through those capital projects and reduced if possible would likely fall to the consulting team. And they may or may not have specialists on their team, and they would have to hire those to come up with the restoration plan, management plan, and some replanting as part of that, and cover those costs for kind of the consulting and the activities. I can't say site by site whether that's possible or not. So we'd have to have some comments probably from management and transportation in particular, because this seems to be affecting the roadside operations. We have met with transportation operations to deal with this operationally. Also met with our stormwater management group and our parks operations group. It was more of an operations approach rather than this suggestion, which is project-based. So I think we might need a little more time to kind of assess how that might happen.
Councillor Helmer?
So what I'll do is I'm going to raise it tomorrow at Civic Works Committee, and we can talk about it a bit more there. I don't think we need to, I think I support the request from the advisory committee. I think it's reasonable for us to consider that, and we can talk about it more here and there.
All right. Any other questions, comments? All right. Thank you very much. I just want to move the recommendation. Anything further? Calling the vote. All right.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
And moving. Did you want to address something?
Yes, my name is Ellie Weststein. I live in the southwest area of Lambeth. I've noticed that wherever the soil is disturbed, either roads or new construction in the North Talbot community, anywhere where the land is not farmed or the grass is not cut, the stuff is just exponentially taking over. Like at a minimum, in a farming operation, we didn't spray everything to death. We at least cut it before it went to seed and flowered, and like so much land is now vacant and not even being cut. At a minimum, land should be at least the grass cut or the weeds cut and kept down. And roadsides used to be cut, and now everything's just allowed to grow. So this is going to be so costly down the road if both public and private land is not maintained to prevent this.
All right. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Moving then on to item number 14, which is an application by Sifton Properties regarding property located at 1977 Sandy Somerville Lane. I'll have to open the public participation meeting. Anything further? Voting?
Do I get to speak on this, or?
Okay, well, you want to speak on the Phragmites issue?
No, on the new one here.
Oh, yeah, when we get to that point.
Okay.
Yeah, you'll have a chance. Oh, no, don't worry about it.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Go ahead, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The application by Sifton Properties Limited is a request for a zoning bylaw amendment on lands located at 1877 Sandy Somerville Lane. The requested amendment would permit a proposed development of 9 single detached dwelling lots as an extension of the Riverbend Golf Community. This is a private community where tenure is based on long-term land leases. The requested zoning change will facilitate an application for a consent, which has been submitted for the purpose of severing off the existing residence that currently occupies these lands with a reduced lot area. The subject lands are located at the eastern terminus of Sandy Somerville Lane, which is a cul-de-sac street within Sifton's Riverbend Golf Community. The site has frontage and access at the end of the cul-de-sac, which is a private street. Access is permitted via a private right-of-way through the Riverbend Golf Community to Keynes Road. Approximately 1.3 hectares of the overall area of the site consists of the existing residence and accessory buildings, driveway, and open manicured lawn with a number of planted ornamental trees. Of that area, approximately 0.9 hectares is proposed for the development of the 9 dwelling lots. The proposed development would occur within the area that is currently a manicured lawn. A 10-meter buffer is proposed between the limits of the development and the edge of the Canes Woods and will be zoned open space. So in the aerial photograph that you're looking at, you can see the surrounding uses. You can see the bulb at the end of Sandy Somerville Lane and some of the residential dwellings that have been developed fronting onto Sandy Somerville. The golf course immediately to the north and the Canes Woods ESA to the east and to the south. And so the line work that you're looking at, that overlay, those are the zone lines. And you can see the primarily grassy open area where the proposed development would be located. It's zoned residential R110 bracket 6, and as well as there's a pocket that reaches or sort of enveloped by the Canes Woods, which where the existing dwelling is located. The official plan designates the lands that are affected by the requested zoning changes as low-density residential. And the primary permitted uses are single detached, semi-detached duplex dwellings, as well as multiple attached forms of residential, such as row houses or cluster houses. Cluster houses may be permitted up to a maximum limit of 30 units per hectare. In June of this year, AECOM Consulting was retained by the applicant to complete field investigations as to the natural heritage conditions and to confirm and stake the Canes Woods ESA boundary. The boundary was staked at the drip line of the trees along the edge of the ESA. Based on the field work completed in conjunction with the development proposal, an EIS is not required, provided a 10-meter buffer between the staked drip line and the proposed residential lot line in accordance with the city's ecological buffer guidelines is provided. And that planting and restoration plans are also provided through the site plan approval process. A small portion of the proposed development overlaps the erosion hazard limits as shown on the official plan mapping, and so that was looked at as well. And the response from the Upper Thames River Conservation Authority indicated that they had met with the applicants on site back in July. Based on the configuration of the proposed development, the Conservation Authority confirmed that geotechnical study would not be required and that the area proposed for the development is outside of the stable slope lines. I would also add that with respect to the London plan, the subject lands that are affected by the recommended zoning amendment are within the neighborhood's place types category, which permits a range of uses, including single, semi, duplex, triplex, and townhouse dwellings, and small scale communities facilities. So this is a conceptual plan of the development proposal that was accompanying the application from Sifton, and it identifies the configuration of the site, the nine lots, as well as the open space buffer on the easterly side, as well as the existing residents to be retained and the driveway access to be retained. So the zoning then that's being recommended is from a residential R1 special provision zone to three zones, a residential R6 special provision zoning. And this zoning is generally consistent with the existing residential zoning along Sandy Somerville Lane and other developed phases throughout the Riverbend Golf community. It permits various forms of cluster housing in a land lease community format, and that includes detached dwellings from single detached or attached homes such as semi-detached, duplex, triplex, fourplex townhouses, stacked townhouses, and low-rise apartment buildings up to a maximum density of 30 units per hectare and maximum height of 12 meters. The requested special provisions would deal with, and staff are generally supportive of these, it would deal with the minimum lot frontage of 0 meters to recognize that the lot does not have frontage on a public road. minimum side yard depth adjacent the open space zone of 1 meter to recognize that there will be an additional 10 meters setback as proposed within the open space buffer, and a minimum side yard depth to the adjacent zones to the west of 1.2 meters in order to maintain the continuity with the side yard setbacks and spacing between the dwellings along Sandy Somerville Lane. A residential R1 zoning is recommended, and it's basically a revised version of the current R1-10 zoning, but applied to a smaller parcel of land. And with the special provision regulations that are needed with respect to minimum lot area and setbacks, as the proposed lot would no longer be adjacent to the golf course lands on the north side. It would also have a reduced land area, as I mentioned. And finally, open space zoning is recommended for the buffer, and that is the open space OS5 zone variation. It permits such uses as conservation lands, conservation works, passive recreational uses. It's the same zoning as currently applied to the lands to the west and to the south, the Cairns Woods. In response to the public liaison notice from residents, there was concern for the protection of forest and wildlife habitat. And as mentioned, these lands are, as currently used, are a residential property with maintained lawns, gardens, and ornamental trees. They're located immediately adjacent to the golf course community and the Cairns Woods ESA. Wildlife have been observed in the area, such as white-tailed deer and wild turkey. The findings of the investigation of natural heritage conditions undertaken by AECOM indicated that no species at risk were recorded or observed within the subject lands or immediate surrounding ESA lands. No provincially or regionally rare vegetation communities or floral species were found within the subject lands. And the investigation concluded with the recommendation that there be a 10-meter buffer from the ESA boundary for the proposed development, and that was determined in accordance with the city's ecological buffer guidelines. A concern did come up at the EPAC meeting with respect to fencing, and the fencing of the open space buffer adjacent the ESA can be looked at and will be part of the preparation of the landscape plan that will be coming forward at the site plan approval stage. So that's the overlay of the zoning of the recommended zones that I've just given you an overview of. And our recommendation is in support of the application on the basis that the zoning is compatible with adjacent development and represents an appropriate extension of Sandy Somerville Lane, a private street within the Riverbend Golf community. The proposed site development plan incorporates an appropriate buffer from the Cairns Woods ESA, and as part of this amendment will be rezoned open space OS5. And the recommended zoning is consistent with the official plan designation for the site and consistent with the provincial policy statement.
Thank you. Technical questions? There being none, does the applicant wish to say anything? I thought you were back there.
I'll just indicate that we are in agreement with the staff report. I know that there were some public comments, so if there are any questions from the public or from committee members, I'd be happy to address them after.
Thank you. So we'll go to the public participation. Sir, I knew you wanted to speak. We'll just need your name and your address.
My name is Brian Watson, and my address is 1370 Cairns Woods Terrace. I guess the question that I have is what assurances do we have that there's no development on the Cairns Wood ESA? Because on the zoning map that I have, it's all highlighted as part of the rezoning.
Okay. Is there anything else you wish to say before we get an answer to your question? Or is that your concern?
I mean, I'm totally fine with what's there. It's just, I mean, one side it shows one thing and then the other side it shows another.
Okay. Do you wish to just clarify that for the gentleman?
A copy of this concept plan was included in the public liaison notice, so that the line work on there and the information shown on that concept plan identifies the staked ESA boundary, as well as the 10-meter setback.
So the answer is that it is, his concern, you can tell him that it is not encroaching on
It is
it?
not encroaching on the ESA, correct.
Okay. Anything else that you wanted to address?
So just to be clear, the area to the south of Sandy Somerville there, that is an environmentally significant area and will not be developed.
That's correct, and that it is currently zoned open space, OS5, to further enhance the area and to protect it.
Great, thank you.
You're very welcome. Then moving across, anyone else? So we'll, going once, going twice, we'll close the public participation meeting. Voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
Committee, anything? Do you want me to, Councillor Turner?
Thanks. Just with respect to the point about not requiring an EIS for this site, there's a difference, and perhaps you can walk me through it a little bit, between a trigger distance and a buffer. And that trigger distance is the distance from any environmental feature which would require an environmental impact study, and the buffer is the amount of space that an environmental impact study would delineate the boundaries of those features from which development must occur. Is that correct? And so is there no concern with trigger distance associated with that from a water course? I think like a PSW has a provincially significant wetland has a trigger distance of 200 meters. I believe. So there's those components in the environmental management guidelines that I don't know if were addressed here or not. And through you, Mr. Chair.
I certainly can't answer that, so I'll hand it over to staff.
Sure. Hopefully I can help out here. Fortunately, a good deal of that work was done at the secondary planning stage when the whole area was looked at and preliminary buffers were set at that time with AECOM. So quite a bit of work had been done previously. So in effect, waiving the EIS, in fact, it had already been done with some preliminary buffers. This was just confirming that in fact the setbacks that were recommended are still appropriate. So without duplicating processes for such a small subdivision, we accepted the minimum standards that really confirming what was done at the secondary plan stage.
And sorry, if I might just to follow up. So I don't see the gradients on this, but its proximity to the river is fair, but is it high that we're not concerned about flood zones? I'd imagine that that's automatic in the OS designations. But.
Through the chair again, yes, the distance to the river at this location, 150 meters perhaps, but it's also probably 50 meters above the river, quite high bluffs for Cairns Woods.
Councillor Helmer?
I have a question about lot number 9, which seems to have a lot of the existing trees, and they're sort of along the curve of that private driveway that's going down to the other residence. I wonder if perhaps the applicant could speak to the plans for retaining trees. It looks like a lot of the lots, I don't know how many of these trees can be retained, especially that one where it looks like half the trees on the existing property are located.
As part of the site plan pre-consultation that we undertook, one of the requirements will be for us to complete a tree inventory and preservation plan. So it would be looked at in more detail at that time. I know that our ecologists have been on site and so did provide just a draft document very recently, but we haven't had a chance to review that or to discuss it with city staff. Certainly if there is an opportunity to retain trees and it would be acceptable from a grading and engineering standpoint, I'm sure that we would like to retain anything that we can, but it will be dependent on the engineering requirements as well as the condition of the trees.
As far as the zoning goes, I'm very supportive of it. I think it's a good way to fit some new lots and some different options into this existing subdivision. I think it's very well done.
My apologies. Thank you, Mr. Chair, for indulging me. Just on page 10, it's a map of the site, and it has a red line going through lots 7 and 6, states maximum hazard line. Does that speak to either slope or floodplain?
I can speak to that actually, if you like. That is the hazard line from a slope standpoint as per the official plan schedules. We noted that that line was there, and so that's one of the reasons why we did actually meet with the UTRCA on site to make sure that there were no issues. We had some additional information from the past that had been prepared by Golder Associates at the time of the original community plan that identified the stable slope line. And they determined that there was not an issue from a stable slope standpoint and that we did not have to provide any additional information. But we met with 2 or 3 of them on site along with city staff at one point as well.
Thank you, that's helpful. I guess I wonder with the map still actively showing that line and having active development within the line raises some questions for me, and I'm not sure if the line gets modified appropriately on city maps from this point.
Staff. Is that someone can help with that?
Yeah, we may need to, and it'll be determined through the site plan process, that if we need to submit an application to the UTRCA for a permit within that area, we will do that. But they'd indicated when we were on site, they didn't know whether or not we'd actually even have to do that, and that would be dealt with through the site plan process.
Anything further? Motion is up. Anything further? Voting.
Closing the vote, the motion carries 5-0.
No items for direction, no deferred matters. Motion for adjournment. Councillor Turner, seconded by Councillor Helmer. All in favor? Trick or treat safely, please. Have a great evening.